Let's start with the Brisbane Lions. Probably the most calm, composed, selfless, proper team game of football I've seen them play in quite a long time. And they've played some damn good footy, some really good football. But it was just like, look, Sydney fans have every right, I think, to be hard on their team for what they dished up based on the season they had, because at times it was pretty lackluster. The effort was just like, what are you doing? But I don't think there are many teams, if any. I don't think there are any teams in the comp. Now that I think about it, I said many. I've got on my notes here there aren't many teams. I don't think there are any teams who would be able to keep up with that Lions team for more than a quarter on Saturday. The way they were playing, it was just like, geez. Were there a couple of selection decisions that went wrong for Sydney in the end? Yes. Logan McDonald shouldn't have played. He was clearly battered. Um, would they have gotten more out of the experience of someone like a Taylor Adams? Would they have gotten more from just playing Callum Mills instead of Logan McDonald and taking that risk? Maybe. It's all very hypothetical, I think, because it is what it is. But you would hope that they can learn from those calls because there are a couple of very wrong calls made in the end. Um, but then again, they've lost like four of their last five grand finals. So how many learning experiences can you have before you get it right? That's another thing to keep in mind. But I think in hindsight, a lot of my Sydney tip was based on merit and the season they've had and the heights that I knew that they'd reached and could reach, rather than just picking it based on who I thought was a better team at the time. Um, and I think in the end, that's just not how you tip grand finals. And I literally said it last week. I said in my predictions, and I've been saying it for the last 3, 4 weeks, how important momentum is. And I backtracked on it at the very last moment because Brisbane had more momentum. Brisbane had all the good form leading into that grand final, and I decided to go. Not that Sydney didn't have any momentum because they obviously had a pair of very good performances leading into that grand final, but I just think Brisbane had it all set up, and I still went with Sydney because they had the better season as a whole and the more consistent season as a whole, and because they deserved it, that's why I went that way. Yeah, don't tip grand finals that way. Clearly, I will learn from that moving forward. Unless Carlton are there, then I'll just tip them every time. But no, Brisbane were dominant. They were pretty dominant from siren to siren. I think they got a well-deserved win in the end, and it was well-deserved for the work that they've put in over the last 6 years, in my opinion. So yeah, just a really good team game. I don't think anyone put any less effort than any of their teammates, if that makes sense. It was just everyone stood up. That's what I take from their performance as a whole. But yeah, Will Ashcroft takes home Norm. Sort of half nailed that. I mean, I picked Heaney because I picked Sydney, but I did say Brisbane win. It's Ashcroft, in my opinion, and he's just such a good player. Um, Such a good story as well. That ACL and to come back and have half a season and then win a Norm Smith is not easy. Not easy at all. He's a good player. He's a good player. And yeah, he's gonna keep being a good player. Gary Ayres Award, he wasn't able to nab that. Lockie Neal got that in the end quite comfortably by 6.5 votes. The final tally there was 26.5 to Lockie Neal, 20 to Heaney, and 18.5 to Ashcroft. Obviously, Heaney, he none of them had a good game, but he definitely didn't have a good game in that grand final. So no votes for him, and Lockie Neal runs away with it. The tally for the game itself, obviously each score was times by 1.5. So Ashcroft and Neal finished on 13.5. We mentioned them both, absolute stars. Um, Neal, I said in the Brownlow prediction, he's literally just one of the best players we've ever seen. So even with a banged up foot, he just put on another clinic. We shouldn't be surprised that he had the game he did in a grand final. Kale Archie finished on 7.5 votes. The final series this guy has just had, my God. He's becoming he's already underrated, but he's becoming such an important piece of that team. And I think he's going to have a lot more attention from defenders next year because Brisbane are going to look to go back to back. A lot of people are going to expect them to give it a really good shot. And he's been a big piece of how they've finished the year. He's going to get a lot more attention, I think. But their forward line is outstanding. You're going to need a bloody good defense to beat Brisbane on any given day. Speaking of, Kyle Lohmann finished on 6 votes for the day. Easily his best game ever. Just toyed with them. Like he's not going to be far off being one of the best small forwards in the comp if he carries this trajectory the way you'd expect him to carry it. Obviously, Charlie is not getting younger, Charlie Cameron, so he's going to continue to be good. But when he starts to tail off, they've got their guy right there. 3 votes to Brandon Starcevic, just so composed, difficult to beat. Did an unbelievable job. I think Harris Andrews, oh, I know Harris Andrews didn't get any votes, but I thought the pair of them together were immense. Very good pairing. But Stas was just unreal. Um, and then 1.5 votes went to Joe Danaher. Just so selfless in attack. So selfless. Structurally, he's extremely important. We know that. Got his 2 goals, and obviously he's not putting up mammoth numbers as a full forward, but that's not what he was there to do on Saturday at all. So he did his job well. And I really hope he stays on next year because we're still a little bit unsure as to how much truth there is to those rumors that he may be finishing up. But they need him. They clearly need. He's just unreal. In the past, he's been very inconsistent. I think he's slowly shaken that tag because of the work he does aside from just kicking goals. Because he's not that kind of forward that is just there to kick goals. So an unbelievable performance as a whole. I mean, those are the players that got coaches' votes. Other than those players, I think there are many players who deserve a shout, a mention, at least just for the performance they put in. Dane Zorko is always unbelievably composed. He's just elite, Dane Zorko. So he was unbelievable again. I thought Hugh McCluggage was really good, particularly early. They kind of had to get a hold onto him by the end of the game because he was just like he was off the chain at times. So he was very good. Um, I thought Ryan Lester also very composed. That back line at Brisbane is just like the most experienced, like you would trust them with your life. That back line. And Ryan Lester's a part of that. He was unbelievable. Um, Geez, they were all good. They were all just so good. Like just such a good football team. And imagine how we'd be talking about. Obviously, the season will be talked about very different now because of the context of their first half of the year and how they had to fight back. And it's almost more impressive because of that. But imagine they just like played the first half of that season the way they played the second half of that season. Would it be the most dominant football team since that Essendon team, maybe as dominant? How many games did they lose in that second half of the year? I don't think they lost many. I can't imagine that. Oh, they lost a couple in the run home. They lost to the Giants, they lost to the Pies. But aside from that, it was like 11 and 13. Like they were just unbelievable. Anyway, so good. So good. So deserved.